but a bunch. Cool. Hello, Lithuania. How are you today? Good? Good? Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you, thank you. Now, this is not my first time in Lithuania. I was here probably 11 years ago. A lot has changed since then in Lithuania. A lot has changed in Europe. And a lot has changed in the world. And I'm here today to talk to you about how to build unshakable business resilience in the face of geopolitical risk. Do you know why? Because the world has gone absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. My Lithuanian friends, you have a war on your doorstep, which isn't getting any better. In fact, it's creeping closer to your borders despite the promises from the international community to solve it. Add to that AI proliferation, which is completely changing business models. You also have societal differences. Not many Lithuanians are being born, and many are also leaving the country. If you sell products, physical products, that's also in turmoil too. Tariffs internationally, and all these things happening at the same time, as well as probably 50 other problems happening, which you have to contend with as business leaders, as investors, as policymakers. And I can imagine why you'd feel uncertain about the future. But as you all know, in business, uncertainty is a killer. Fundamentally what it does is that it slows down business decisions, which means you're not investing as much. You're waiting to see what happens. It lowers morale in your organizations as a society. And it also compounds short-term thinking in your businesses, which isn't any good. But hopefully by the end of this talk, we'll have a chance to fix this and at least change your perception about where the world is going and how you can interact with it, all right? But for me to be able to do a good job, I need to understand who's in the room today. So what I want to do is a raise of hands for the people here who are in the policy-making world, politicians, policy-making. Hands up. Hands up. Hands up high, 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 so I can see where you are. So these are the policymakers. Hands up, people here who are business leaders. Either you're on your own business, you work in a big business, in a listed business. Hands up high. Hands up high, hands up high, 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 high. Okay, any investors in the room also? Investors? A little bit, a few investors in the room. Well, to be honest, these three groups of people are the three groups of people which have the biggest potential, have the biggest potential to impact, the world. So it's good that you're all joining each other here today. And the secret to building unshakable business resilience is actually in the title, if you read it properly. Look at the words in red, in particular. So let's start off. How to build. We must understand that building anything takes time. It takes a vision of where you want to see your organizations, where you want to see your countries. You need to have the tools in which to do this. You need to have competent team leaders and a leadership team. And you also fundamentally need to use first principles thinking when making decisions to improve your business situation. So that's the first thing you have to realize. It takes a long time. Rome wasn't built in a day. Lithuania as it stands wasn't built overnight. The EU, nothing. So this isn't how to build resilience as a get-rich-quick scheme or tips and tricks of how to do these things, because they won't work. I'm sure in your organizations you try to find ways to make it work faster, but it won't. So it takes a long time. And you need to have the stamina to be able to withstand these things and to understand these things. This talk could easily be about building unshakable business resilience in the face of technological change, societal change, globalization change, which is to say that across the lifetime of your business and across the lifetime of your careers, you have been faced with and will be faced with challenges that you have not expected, are not prepared for, and require answers to. The world is moving at a much, much faster rate. And these four things, globalization, geopolitics, transformative technology, and societal change, are all compounding and are all growing and are impacting you at the same time. So you must be ready for it. And third, geopolitical risk. Now, typically when people talk about geopolitical risk, there's a couple of problems that emerge. First of all, I think it's too academic as a topic, at least when you analyze it. It's too much of academics talking about how things work in theory, what this means, for great power relations and all of these different things, which isn't relevant to a business audience. So you disconnect from it. So the aim of this talk is to make it much more actionable and practical for you. Yes? The second thing is that it tends to be very intimidating for people, especially if you're just starting off in your career or you never had to face these things in the past and you're expected to find answers, or your bosses expect you to know how to respond, Because it's such a global topic with high stakes, there tends to be a sense of, I don't know how to understand it, I don't know how to approach it. So this talk is going to be much more practical for you. Okay, so we're going to strip away that sense of intimidation because it's important. And the third point is, when we talk about geopolitics, it's really a topic which has relations to your work when you see it in the news. When it's not in the news, typically people don't focus on it. And that's a problem, because you can't solve issues when they come in the news cycle, when you face them, because by that time, the stakes are high, you won't be able to respond as fast as you would like to have responded, and you end up falling behind. So this talk is meant to prepare you so that no matter what happens now and into the future, you're given the tools to help think about these things in a much more clearer way. Because if you can think clearly, you can make decisions more confidently. If you can think clearly, you can make decisions much more confidently. So that's the aim of today's talk. So if I can do these things, I think we're in a good place together. To do this, we have three main aims for this talk, okay? The first aim of this talk is to analyze Europe's historical and current positioning. That's the first thing we're going to do. The next thing we're going to do is to show geopolitics in 3D, okay? And I'll explain what that means throughout this talk. And thirdly, we're going to share Lithuania's development story throughout time, to put into context the challenges that we're facing today, what you faced in the past, and what potentially you'll face in the future. Okay, is that fair? Are you ready for it? So what I promise to you is that if you give me your undivided attention for the next 23 minutes or so, what I'm going to do is give you the tools which you can use to make sure business decisions are made in a much more confident way. Because geopolitics is something that impacts everyone, and in particular, it's impacted me in my life. Now, this is a picture of me and my daughter, maybe a few years ago. But what I want you to focus on isn't the two people in the front, but what I want you guys to focus on is the building in the back, because that's where I was born. Where I was born, it was a very volatile time in my country. It was the fall of the Soviet Union, the fall of communism, and the birth of new opportunities and a new political system, economic system. And fundamentally, my family, as well as many of your families perhaps, had a very important decision to make. Now, their decision was, do we stay in our country and experience new developments that we're not going to be used to, we may not agree with, or we may not be ready for, or do we move to new lands, new places, and to see where life takes us there? Many people took the second option. Many people decided to leave, and leave in a hurry. It was a very famous story where an Italian ship docked at a port in my city, in fact. And there, many of my countrymen decided to hop on the ship and force the captain to sail the ship to Italy by force. Through negotiations and through pressures, they were able to do this. 20,000 people jumped on that ship to go to Italy back during the fall of communism. And you haven't seen what 20,000 people on a ship looks like. It looks a little bit like this. Now you can imagine what went through the minds of the people doing this. The desperation that they faced, and the sense of uncertainty that you may face as a business today, they faced even back then, 35 odd years ago. So Europe is very used to these kinds of pressures across time. Very used to it. But for me, when we moved to the UK eventually, the conversations around our dinner table were never really about the weather or about what's on TV or about sports. They're always about what's happening back home. What are the politics back home, the geopolitics back home, the economics back home? So I was born into geopolitical chaos. So for me, this isn't just an academic practice. This is something we went through, and this is something that I try to answer myself throughout my studies and throughout my work. What drives human affairs? What drives business? What drives the mechanisms of world affairs, which led me to develop the company I have today. And we advise, governments across the world. We have meetings and we negotiate and we work with, we have the Turkish embassy here, Tunisians, the Canadians, Hungarians, the Uzbeks. There's actually the Lithuanian diplomatic representative in London, for those of you who don't know, South Africans, UAE, and many, many more. And the reason I share this with you is because how geopolitics evolves impacts the world. So you're not in it alone. So when you're looking at Europe and how Europe is facing these issues, we have to break down what do we mean also by Europe, right? Because there is no one Europe by any stretch of the imagination. There's different Europes for different people. What do I mean? We have the Baltics, where you're from. We have the Balkans, where I'm from. We have the DACH region and the Nordic regions, where some of our clients are from. We have the Iberian Peninsula. We have the Mediterranean also, which overlaps with the Balkans. Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Eurasia as a landmass. We also have the Euro-Atlantic. And the reason I bring this up is because different people around the world, different investors, your clients, your stakeholders, you yourselves are building perceptions of these different regions in Europe. So what are you doing to improve relations with your clients, with your partners, with your stakeholders, with your investors, to make sure that despite what's going on in the Baltics now, despite the pressures that you face in different ways, what are you doing to strengthen your relations with your business partners? Because that's fundamentally the best way you can build unshakable business resilience, by helping your stakeholders understand what pressures they're going through, right? What pressures you're going through, and keeping communication lines open and building and continue to build a good brand, Lithuania, good brand in terms of the Baltics, so you can withstand these things. And this is very, very important. Do not underestimate this, because the perception of different parts of Europe and different parts of the world shape how people see them, shape the interests they have in that part of the world, right? Shape how much money they're willing to invest in those parts of the world, which matters a lot. And the way that's shaped is by your participation daily with your customers, with your clients, with your stakeholders, with your teams, right? How bold you are, right? How well you can plan for the future. These things matter, right? This is just the modern day configurations of Europe. Europe has gone through many different, evolutions of change, right? We have ancient Greece with the Peloponnesian Wars between Athens and Sparta, right? We have the rise of the Roman Empire. We have the fall of the Roman Empire, right? We have the rise of leaders across time, right? We have Charlemagne, for example. We have the Renaissance, which evolved over time as well, right? Different Europes at different times, different conflicts at different times, right? Different sets of agendas at different times. Business was affected throughout history. This is not new, right? French Revolution and the Enlightenment. Then we come into the age of the Industrial Revolution. World War I, World War II, coming closer to what we've experienced now, right? The fall of the Berlin Wall. Some of you experienced this, some of you have family who've experienced it, right? And to our modern day machinations in the European Union. Which is to say, the reason I bring this up is to showcase that Europe, this is not new for Europe. Conflict is not new to the region. Businesses have always been impacted and always been helpful in helping governments shape policy agendas and come out of it different throughout time. So put yourself into the context of what you're facing today. But two main things have emerged across Europe over time that are worth exploring, right? The first thing is the political structure. There has not been a region in the world that has gone through so many differences in power structures. As a continent, we are probably top. We've had empires, we've had kingdoms, we've had principalities, right? We've had grand duchies, we've had city-states, and now we have modern-day nation-states. So the evolution of Europe's political system and the evolution of business go hand in hand, right? Merchants of the past shaped the rules of commerce in the past. So you're not new in these volatile times. It's not new at all. And also, secondly, what we've noticed across time, especially after the fall of the Roman Empire, is that there's been a pivot from divergence to convergence in 3 primary areas. The first one is in our identity as Europeans, right? It's homogenized in a way. Hold on, you can say, but didn't you just say that there's different kinds of Europe, and now you're saying that we're homogenized? Yes, both can be true at the same time. You know, when I ask my daughter, who do you love more, mom or dad, she says yes, which means 2 things can be true at the same time without the need for explanation. So these are the characteristics that build it. The political direction of Europe, although regionally, right, the Iberian Peninsula may have different agendas, and the Baltics may have different agendas depending on what's happening at any given time, but the structures of that have homogenized to strengthen your ties and to also help protect business interests throughout these structures. And also economic strategy across time. You may agree with it, you may disagree with it, but they're coming together with the aim, you may again not agree, to help bolster EU production, protect against outside influence, so that EU businesses should thrive. So instead of fighting within each other in the past or between each other through history, what we've done is that we've unified, and now we're competing with the world, right? So what caused us to be resilient in the past, by having this sense of competition, we've brought together, and now we're saying, let's compete with the Americans, let's compete with the Chinese, let's compete with the Middle East. But how well are we doing in this? That's what we're going to explore. Fundamentally, what we can see in Europe today, and no matter where you're going, sometimes it's the same story. Stagnation of economic growth, difficulty in finding growth drivers, demographic issues which are impacting us. But we also have good things working towards our future, our consumption. The bloc of almost 500 million people still remains a prime area for people to sell into. Right? Brand Europe is still very strong in terms of our exports. So if something's working also in our favor. But to understand geopolitics as a concept isn't good just to keep it in theory. So what we're going to do now, we're going to dive in deeper, okay? Talking about the Geopolitical Risk Matrix. This is something we've developed for you to understand practically how to apply geopolitics each and every one of your businesses, or policymaking, as a fact. Would it be surprising to you to say that geopolitics has different speeds to it, right? Different speeds. So you have things on this continuum which happen at different times. We have FX risk, which is very, very fast. Sanctions, which happen a bit slower than that. Trade deals, which take, longer to agree. Wars, and also global governance. But at the same time, what we also have is the impact of geopolitical risk is also on a continuum, right? So we have fast and slow, but we also have global and bilateral. Global and bilateral in terms of its impact. So everything that we experience in business can be plotted on this graph, right? And I can guarantee that the majority of businesses in this room and also in the world tend to focus on the days and weeks, maybe months when it comes time to planning for your futures. Planning, your future development plans, growth strategies, etc. But let's see what it really looks like in terms of the impacts. We have global, regional, and blocks, right? EU, BRICS, and other things which have emerged, and also bilateral impacts. So the same points we brought up before, let's plot them on this new graph to show how they've evolved and how they've changed, right? We have, for example, global governance, which is probably the least focused on for businesses because it happens very, very slowly, over decades, right? And it's also very global. So that's not right in your purview. But how Lithuania is acting within institutions of the EU, the UN, etc., how much effort they're placing in the different bodies, what they want to achieve in these bodies is important for businesses to focus on, right? Sanctions. Sanctions, as you can see, some last decades, like the US sanctions on Cuba, which have lasted 63 years. 63 years. Or you have some sanctions which go on for months. The shortest sanctions, I think, the UK placed on an African country a long time ago, they lasted 36 minutes. 36 minutes. But the degree of sanctions and how long they stay on a business is important. Again, they're global to the regional level, which is easier for you to understand as businesses because all you need to do is not do business with them, right? So that, I suppose, is easier and within your line of scope, right? Line of sight. Then we have trade deals. Trade deals are much, much larger, much more complex, which take between weeks to years to agree, right? Some are bilateral, some are blocks, like we have with the EU and other blocks, and some are global, WTO, the GATT in the past, which turned into the WTO. So these things take time to agree and take moments to disintegrate, as we see with the US, for example. We also have wars, which impact businesses heavily, in very obvious ways, and also have secondary and tertiary impacts to you, to your clients, to your workforce, to many different areas. Again, some of these things are bilateral wars, some are block wars, some are global wars, which Europe has experienced all too well in our memories. And then FX risk, for those of you who care about these things, it's something which moves fast, although we do have pegs which try to limit the amount of volatility, but currency fluctuations can impact, especially if you're an exporter or importer, especially if you work in a part of the economy which relies on stable pairings, right? FX volatility is a killer sometimes. So you need to keep a mind out for these things. So breaking it down like this is very important so you can see how things evolve and where your minds are. But what do you notice also? You notice that the biggest overlap of the geopolitical spectrum is between months and years, where the biggest volatility happens. And also it's between blocks and also the global landscape. So if your mind is thinking in days and weeks and only think about how Lithuania is impacted by the rules or by the agreements we make with Poland, you're missing the biggest part. So you need to stretch your thinking to encapsulate your plans over the months and years. That's another way to build resilience, by doing this, by putting in the structures, putting in the teams that can do this. But this generally means a few things. First of all, risk is emerging at the same time all the time, right? But this also means something else. Your eyes need to be everywhere, but importantly, with different levels of focus. Because you can't focus on everything at the same time, it's impossible. And no one's expecting you to do this, but you must build an understanding of the tempo of international relations. You need to look at things from globalization, from global governance, all the way to FX and everything in between to find out where should we put our focus, how are our clients been impacted, how are their clients been impacted, right? Build models, build scenarios in your teams so that you at least have an idea of what to do if things go wrong, or go right for that matter. But how do you do this? How do you do this in a way which actually makes sense, which is practical, and which is easy to do, right? Academics can't help you too much. Practice helps you. So let's do it. The first place to start is to understand that you must think in first principles. And also what you must do is understand that what drives international affairs, what drives it fundamentally, and without exception, is power, understanding power. And more importantly, state power, government power, which is the highest form of power. Why? Because governments are sovereign. They make the rules, right? They make the rules that you must live by. They make the policies that you must live by. They're also the prime target for lobbying efforts, which is important to realize. There's different ways in which you can actually understand power, but there's 6 different areas that you must focus on, what we call a country's centers of power. So you have a country's active consumer markets, the military balance, the technological leadership, systemically important commodities, geostrategic positioning, and their financial strength. These are the 6 areas that you must focus on when looking at building better business resilience, right? These have been turned into sub-indices where we've ranked 194 countries against, right? These are made up of themes, which are made up of variables. It's a bit complex, but if you want to ask me about this later, you can. Take pictures in 2 seconds, I'll show you. Now take pictures. What we've also created as part of that is the Global Power Index, which measures the country's global power standing across time over the last 30 years. And we've ranked Lithuania and 193 other countries across this, right? So this is what the world looks like, at least in the top 10 in 2023 of powers. See it? You can also see it like this. Now, what do you notice here? You notice the power differential, right? Out of 100, the United States is first, China second, India third. But look at the differences between India and China. Look how far behind China is, or how far behind India is to China, right? They may be ranking third, but the differences are stark. Let's zoom into the Baltics. How do the Baltic countries look? Have you got any idea? Got any interest to see? Let's see. So this is how the countries rank in your region. Poland, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia. This is where you stand. So Poland ranks 31st in the world, Estonia 60th, Lithuania 67th, Latvia 68th in the world. in terms of great powers. Right? And these are their scores, so very close together. Okay? Across time, this is how your region ranks. So what we can clearly see, for example, is that Poland has consistently remained top, between 40 and 30 in terms of their score across time, right? And there tends to be a sandwiching of the other countries. What we also see is that the biggest dip has come from Estonia from 2011 to 2013, where they've lost a lot of their power, right? The biggest winner has been Latvia, with a big jump up from roughly 81st to 70, all right? What we also notice is how do your countries rank across the sub-indices? What do you notice here, right? So the shorter the line, the better it is. So what do we see? We see, for example, Poland consistently winning in terms of the sub-indices. In fact, 58.3% of the time, all the countries across all indices rank under 80, right? So between 1 and 80 in terms of their rank. 20.8% rank under 40, so between first and 40th, 20%, 21% of the time. That's how your country goes. That's how your region is developing. So the main aim of this is to bring your countries up, to make sure that you push all these sub-indices up so that you're doing better, to make your businesses better, to make your resilience better, to build this unshakable business resilience, as I mentioned before. So we notice that Poland is winning consistently across the board, consistently, right? But we also notice that there's no clear second place in the Baltics, which is good because this inspires competition, this inspires learning, this inspires case studies for your country and other countries in the region to learn from successes. And also, healthy competition is necessary to drive growth and innovation, and that should be a priority. So this competition amongst the last three countries should not be seen as, oh, well, we're doing okay, we're not doing okay. It should be seen as, what can we learn from each other? What can we learn from the region? What can we learn from countries across the world from us through this model so we can improve business resilience? So thinking in first principles, understanding, placing yourself in context to your history, right? And also thinking, what can the future hold and how can we think about it by using a model that's more applicable? That's what I want you to leave here today with. And we're going to end it here, and we're going to open up to Q&A. So thank you so much.
Mr. Murati, thank you so much for your glossy presentations. Gerbėmieji, jeigu turite klausimų, mūsų salėje yra kolegų.
Should you have any questions, you're most welcome to ask them. We have staff with microphones. Should you want to ask a question, please raise your hand, and we will approach you with a microphone. You will be able to ask a question.
Yes.
What do you think Lithuania can do to improve its score in the Global Power Index? Because probably you know, in 2023 we stepped up, we took a huge leap, 27 positions. So what we can do more?
Now what determines what you can do more is what you want to do more, because you have many things at your disposal as a country to improve. Lithuania has developed their vision plan for the future of where it sees its country over the next decade or so. So that's a good place to start. Policymakers, the ones that were in this room today, and the business interests that represent the countries in all the rankings that we've seen, you must decide for yourselves, what do you want to strengthen? Some things are more immediate. You know, you have, as I mentioned, a war on your doorstep, so military preparedness is key. A lot of startups, a lot of funding going into that area, right? Logistics need to be something you need to reinforce. You know, data centers, something else that you need to do. But you need to build a vision of what is brand Lithuania. Where do you want to see yourself into the future? And how do you build the mechanisms to get there now? Working closely with government, working closely with your clients and your partners, and doing that consistently over time is the only way to do this. You know, the countries that I mentioned in the past ask us the same questions. No country wants to be the last. And people understand why the countries are where they are in terms of the top. But you have 6 different ways you can do that, as I mentioned. So where do you place your efforts? You can't place your efforts everywhere. You need to focus on a few things intensely throughout time to build resilience in these areas, to build the leadership capabilities in these areas, and also to build expertise in these areas that then you can use in your populace, in your businesses, as policymakers, to take you, your country, your people, your families, and your businesses forward. Consistency over time always wins.
Thank you, Mr. Murati. As I see, we don't have any more questions. Everything is clear, okay. So your presentation is very glossy. Thank you so much. Oh, we have one question. Okay.
Oh, fantastic.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that many of us have questions, but I would like to ask about demography. What is your view and recommendation for Lithuania? Because, for example, for Poland, we cannot be compared with them. To lose 500,000 for them is small part. For us is 1/6 of our nation. So what can we do? Maybe apart from immigration? Thank you.
Well, there's some things you can do, but what you need to ask is what's possible to do, right? The most obvious things you can do is have more babies over time, right? Get married, have more babies, which is obvious, which is what the world is asking. Every single leader in the world is asking their people to do this. They're giving them incentives to do this. But this is not happening across the board. So demographic decline isn't only unique in Lithuania, right? We see it in almost every single part of the world. Birth rates are going down, okay? So why they're going down, some obvious reasons, right? It's getting more expensive across the years to actually have kids, to maintain children. Families are living globally. You can't rely on your parents as much anymore because you may be in Lithuania tomorrow, but you may be in New York the next decade. So family structures have changed, right? Which means costs have risen to meet these demands. So apart from that, what you need to do is you need to upskill your people. Productivity needs to increase. So for the people who leave, you need to find ways to double your productivity at the same rate as people leaving, which is hard to do, especially in an economy where services and manufacturing play equal and important roles. So find more clients, charge more money for your services, and find ways to do this. It's a very hard question to answer because what you should do and what actually happens and what policymakers are incentivized to do and what businesses are capable of doing is hard. So I'm not going to give you an answer which you can implement now, because will you actually do it? Will you be incentivized to do it? It depends. But these questions that you ask, and I'm sure that you'll have in your minds, is something which is shared by everyone, right? So the most obvious thing is have more babies, right? But again, by the time they reach the workforce, it'll be 20 years from now. So sometimes you need to face what you have. You will face more demographic decline, right? Trying to incentivize people to come back and work in Lithuania should be an imperative, and I'm sure it is an imperative for the government. So finding ways in which you can raise wages, living standards, educational standards for your people so people want to come back and participate in the labor force in Lithuania so that your GDP increases, you can keep cohesive families, right? Keep family together, which is, people don't talk about this too much. Economics strips that away from society, but economics is meant to serve societal needs, not the other way around. So if you can find a way to do this within your own families, within your own organizations, that's what you should do.
Any more questions? We don't have any more questions. Thank you, Mr. Klisman Murati.
Thank you.
Padėkokime plojimais.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well done.